Hey guys, my name's Emily. Honestly, I never thought I'd be sitting here sharing something like this. It's kinda crazy. I mean, I never experienced anything even close to this before. Damn, I still feel it sometimes, like this weight on my chest or a fire burning in my soul. Not the kind of fire you want, but one you can't ignore. So, today I want to talk about something that changed my entire life. Or, well, maybe my death changed it first. You see, I used to mock the Rosary. Yeah, I know that sounds weird. Most people who have experiences with faith, they grow up loving it, or at least believing in it a little. Not me. I was the opposite. I thought the Rosary was just some old, boring chain people wrapped around their fingers to make them feel safe or holy or whatever. I used to laugh at it, poke fun at it, make jokes about those repetitive prayers. It felt meaningless to me, like some outdated superstition for people stuck in the past. But all that changed one night when I died. And I say died like it's no big deal, but it was the most terrifying, intense moment of my life. I was in a car accident. I don't remember everything. I remember the crash, the sound of metal crunching, glass breaking, the world spinning out of control, then blackness, pure nothingness. And then, out of nowhere, I felt something in my hand. I looked down and saw the Rosary. The same thing I mocked all my life was wrapped tight around my fingers. But it wasn't just sitting there, it was glowing softly like it had a life of its own. And there was fire. Not the kind that burns and destroys, but fire that surrounded me, flickering all around like it was alive. It didn't hurt, but it felt like it was cleansing me, judging me. I was terrified, but also calm in this weird way. I don't know how or why the Rosary was with me, but holding it was the only thing keeping me connected to anything real. That's when I realized maybe, just maybe, it meant something deeper than I ever thought. And that experience, man, it shook me to my core. So yeah, after I found myself in that place, whatever you want to call it, the in-between, the veil, the edge of life, I was just standing there in this space that felt like it was made of smoke and memory and silence. Not heaven, not hell. Just somewhere else. And the fire was still there, dancing in slow motion all around me. It didn't move like normal fire, it was alive. It moved with purpose, like it knew who I was and what I'd done. And I swear, I could feel it looking at me, judging me. I still had the Rosary in my hand. It was warm, glowing like an ember, and every bead I touched sent this weird wave of emotion through me, like regret, shame, sadness, but also hope. It was so strange. I had spent years mocking this exact thing. I mean, I literally made a whole TikTok video once pretending to use the Rosary like it was a necklace for a hot nun costume at Halloween. People laughed. I laughed. I never thought anything of it. It was just a joke. But in that place, none of it felt like a joke anymore. It felt like every mockery I ever made was echoing through that fire. Like the space I was in was made out of the consequences of my own words. And yet the Rosary didn't accuse me. It didn't burn me. It just stayed. I remember clutching it like it was the only thing anchoring me to anything that still mattered. And then, I don't even know how to explain this part, but it was like I wasn't alone anymore. There were these shadows or maybe silhouettes. I couldn't see faces, just forms, and they felt heavy. Not physically, but emotionally, like they carried a lot of sorrow with them. And they were watching me, not angrily, not with hatred, but with this deep, aching disappointment. I wanted to run, to scream, but I couldn't. My legs weren't even real there. It was more like I was thought, or memory, or soul, just floating in this judgment fire. And then this voice, clear as anything I've ever heard, whispered, not in my ear, but in my spirit. It said, "You held what you mocked." That's it. No booming God voice, no thunder, just that soft, sorrowful sentence. You held what you mocked. And I broke down, like I didn't have a body, but I cried. I don't even know how that works, but I felt the cry, like my entire being just shattered under the weight of those words. Because I knew what it meant. It wasn't about the Rosary beads, it was about my whole life. I mocked faith. I mocked prayer. I mocked people who loved God because I didn't understand it. And now here I was, clinging to the one thing I made fun of the most. It was like a mirror was being held up to my soul, not just showing what I'd done, but why. I was afraid. That's the truth. I mocked the Rosary because deep down, I was afraid that it might actually be true, that all the stuff I rolled my eyes at, sin, salvation, judgment, grace, wasn't a myth or a fairy tale, but real. And now I was staring right into it. And I had no one to blame but myself. That's when the fire started to move toward me. Slowly. Not like it was going to consume me, but like it was testing me, purifying me. And I squeezed the Rosary even tighter, like it was the only thing keeping me from being swallowed whole. And maybe it was. You ever have a moment when everything you thought was true just melts away and you're left with this awful silence that screams the truth you've been running from? That was me. In fire, in silence, in judgment, holding a Rosary like it was the last rope dangling over hell. And then something even more terrifying happened. But I'll tell you that in the next part. Okay, so here's where things got even more intense. I'm not exaggerating when I say this was the moment everything shifted. Not just around me, but inside me, like something ancient cracked open in my chest. I'm standing there, wrapped in this weird, supernatural fire, the Rosary glowing in my hand like a lifeline, and suddenly, boom, it felt like something ripped through the space I was in. Not loud, not violent, but final, like a curtain being pulled back. I didn't see him right away. I felt him first. It was this pressure. Like the air around me got heavy with meaning, like every atom started humming with this presence. My whole soul just knew Jesus had entered the space. Not because anyone said his name, not because I saw some old painting come to life, but because the truth hit me like a freight train. He didn't have to announce himself. Every part of me just recognized him. Not as a myth, not as some maybe he existed historical figure. I mean Jesus, the one I laughed at, the one people pray to with the very Rosary I used to mock, and I couldn't even look up. I don't think I've ever felt that kind of love and that kind of sorrow at the same time. It's like standing in front of someone who has only ever loved you completely, and all you've ever done is spit in their face. I wanted to hide, disappear, anything but stand there in front of him, but I couldn't move. All I could do was sob, holding the Rosary to my chest like it was shielding me. He didn't speak in words. It was deeper than that. It was like he poured his thoughts into my soul, and I'll never forget it. He showed me moments of my life, real, raw, unfiltered, but not in a shaming way. More like, look, see who you were, and now decide who you want to become. One moment stood out. I was maybe 16, scrolling through my phone, laughing at a video someone posted of an old lady praying in church. I'd stitched it with a clip of me pretending to be her. Exaggerated, mocking. It went viral. I gained thousands of followers. I remember being proud of that. He showed me that moment, and I saw it through his eyes. You guys, it wasn't funny. It was heartbreaking. That woman, she was praying for her dying son, and I had made her pain into content. That broke me, like really shattered something in me I didn't know was still alive. And he didn't accuse me, he just showed me. Every soul I mocked, every sacred thing I turned into a joke, and somehow he still loved me. I felt it. In the middle of that judgment, in the fire, holding the beads I once treated like costume jewelry, I felt love, but not the feel-good, no consequences love I used to imagine. This was holy, this was fierce, this was costly. And then he looked at the Rosary in my hand. I didn't even realize I was gripping it so tightly until that moment. My knuckles were white. The chain had left marks in my skin. And he asked, not with words, but with this deep, soul-level question, do you know what this is now? And I whispered, through whatever voice my soul had, a weapon, because that's what it felt like. Not a decoration, not a superstition, but a sword I never learned how to use. and I started crying all over again because I knew how many battles I had lost in life simply because I refused to pick it up. He nodded gently, and the fire around me calmed, just a little, but enough that I could feel air again, or at least something like it. Peace, maybe for the first time in my entire life. Then he stepped back, not away, just back. And I knew the next part was going to be harder than anything I'd faced so far, because now I had to walk through the fire, still holding the rosary, still clutching the very thing I used to laugh at, and I had no idea what was waiting on the other side. So, walking through that fire wasn't like walking through flames in the movies. It wasn't just heat and smoke and ash. It was memory. It was me. Every step forward felt like walking through a version of myself I had to face, like the fire wasn't trying to burn me, it was trying to purify me. I still had the rosary in my hand, and at this point, it wasn't just a symbol. It was like it had become part of my own heart. I wasn't holding it anymore. It was holding me. As I stepped deeper into the fire, scenes from my life started playing all around me, almost like holograms, 3D memories suspended in this spiritual space. Only, they weren't just memories. They were truths. Honest, unfiltered truth. And they cut. They cut deeper than any words could have. One memory, God, I'll never forget it. I was about 20, sitting in a group chat with some friends. We were joking about people who go to daily mass. I remember typing something like, "Imagine needing bread and wine to fix your emotional damage." LMAO. Everyone laughed. I laughed. It felt clever at the time, but now, in that place, watching it play out again, I felt sick. It was like watching someone slap the face of their own mother and then laugh about it. Jesus didn't show me these things to condemn me. I knew that. I felt that. But there was no denying that each moment held a weight, and the fire forced me to carry it, to feel the impact of my choices, not just on myself, but on others, the people I ridiculed, the faith I mocked, the silence I broke with my arrogance, but at the same time, something amazing was happening. With every step, every memory, every confrontation with the worst parts of myself, the rosary beads in my hand started to glow brighter. It was like they were reacting to my repentance, like every sincere "I'm sorry" that my soul whispered was met with mercy pouring into those beads and then into me. There was this one moment that broke me completely. I saw a scene I didn't even remember until then. I was 17. My mom was crying in her bedroom. The door was cracked open, and I could hear her whispering the rosary under her breath. I remember walking past, rolling my eyes, texting my friend something like, "She's back at it again with her drama prayers." I'd mocked her suffering like it was a sitcom. In the fire, I saw that moment from above. I saw the pain in her soul. I saw how she was praying for me, for my future, for my salvation, and I had turned that into a joke. I fell to my knees, if that's even the right word. Again, I didn't have a body in that place, but I felt myself collapse. And as I did, the fire around me responded. It didn't go out. It got hotter, but not to destroy me. It was like it was burning away layers of my pride, my ego, my selfishness. And then I heard the Hail Mary. Not from outside, from within. "Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee." I didn't say it with my mouth. I knew it in my soul, and it wasn't just words anymore. It was alive. Every syllable, every bead on that chain pulsed with light and memory and mystery. I started to pray, not because I had to, not because someone told me to, but because something inside me had finally awakened. I realized I had been holding a key this whole time, a lifeline, a sword, a song, and then, at the deepest part of the fire, I saw the cross. It wasn't just some object hanging at the end of the rosary. It was him, crucified, alive, waiting, and I knew I had to face him again. Not as a stranger this time, but as someone who was beginning, just barely, to understand the weight of what he did for me. So I took a breath, if you can breathe in that place, and stepped forward, closer, still holding the rosary, still trembling. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't mocking anymore. I was praying, and I meant it. All right, so I stepped closer to the cross, still in the fire, still feeling that crushing mix of sorrow and mercy, still holding the rosary like it's the only thing keeping me from falling apart completely, and I'm staring at him now. Jesus, not a painting, not a statue. Him, on the cross. And it wasn't clean, it wasn't polished like in a church. It was raw. Blood, thorns, wounds that looked like they screamed through time. I remember thinking, how could I have ignored this? How could I have lived 24 years on earth and never once looked at the cross like it was meant for me? His eyes were closed, but the presence was so alive. And then, this moment, I swear, it's burned into me forever. His eyes opened, not like in a horror movie or some big dramatic slow motion thing. It was gentle, quiet. But when he looked at me, I was seen. All of me. Every second I had mocked him, every time I'd scoffed at people praying the rosary, every word I typed, every joke I cracked. He saw it. And still, he looked at me with the most heartbreaking love I've ever felt. No one had ever looked at me like that before. Not even my mom. And in that look, I felt him say, I died for you anyway. That broke me all over again. You'd think by that point, I'd be out of tears or emotion, or whatever the soul uses to express pain, but I wasn't. The truth is, I hadn't really started to feel anything real until that moment, because love like that, when it hits you clean, undeserved, and pure, it destroys you and heals you at the same time. And here's the crazy part. The rosary in my hand, it started to change. Not visibly, but in weight. Like the more I understood what each bead meant, the heavier it got, but not in a bad way. Like it was growing in significance. It wasn't a prop anymore. It was a timeline, a story, his story. Each bead, each prayer was like a rung on a ladder I'd never climbed. And now, suddenly, I wanted to climb. I needed to. Then I heard the sound of voices. Soft at first, then stronger, surrounding me. It was the rosary being prayed, not by me, by others. I realized people on earth were praying, right then, real people, real time. Somewhere someone was holding a rosary, praying for souls, for the lost, for the ones who didn't believe, maybe even for me. And I realized that's what brought the rosary into my hand in the first place. Someone had prayed me here. Someone had begged heaven to give me one more chance. Maybe it was my mom, maybe it was a stranger, maybe it was that old lady I once made fun of online, but the power of their prayer reached into the fire and handed me a lifeline. That's when the fire began to fade, not because I had earned anything, but because mercy was winning. I looked down at the rosary, still warm in my hand. The cross was no longer just a symbol. It was him. It was everything. And then the voice came again. Not his this time, but gentler, like a woman's voice. Peaceful, familiar. It simply said, "You are not finished." I didn't know what that meant. Until I opened my eyes and gasped because I was back in my broken body, back in the hospital. Still holding that rosary in my hand, burned, but alive. Waking up in the hospital felt like crashing back into reality after living through 1,000 years in a single night. The lights above me were blinding, machines were beeping, voices all around, doctors, nurses, my mom crying somewhere close. But the first thing I felt wasn't pain or confusion. It was the rosary, still in my hand. My fingers were burned, red and blistered, the chain pressed so tight it had left an imprint on my skin, as if it had melted into me. The doctors and nurses kept asking questions, poking and shining lights in my eyes, trying to piece together what happened. They were amazed, honestly, that I was even alive. The car had burst into flames, they said. They didn't know how I got out, but I knew. I remembered every detail of that fire, not just the physical flames, but the fire inside, the memories, the faces, that voice, and the rosary. It was still here, still warm, still mine. My mom. God, she rushed to my side, crying so hard she could barely breathe. I remember her clutching my hand and staring at the rosary like it was a miracle. She whispered, "Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Jesus." And I felt this tidal wave of emotion. all those times I made fun of her prayers, all the moments I called her superstitious or dramatic came crashing down. But she didn't care about any of that now. She just held me and thanked God over and over. For a second, I wondered if she knew what had really happened to me, if she could sense that I'd been changed from the inside out. Lying there, I realized I was different. Everything about me felt raw, like new skin. The world was louder, colors brighter, even the pain was more real. But most of all, the memories of that place were still burning in me. I could still hear that voice. You held what you mocked. I could still feel the fire, not as punishment, but as a strange sort of mercy. I knew I could never go back to the person I was before. Not after what I'd seen, not after what I'd felt. There was this weird moment when the nurse came in and tried to take the rosary out of my hand to clean my burns. I wouldn't let go. I just couldn't. It was like my fingers were fused to it. I think I scared her a little because I started crying, begging her to let me keep it. She looked at my mom and just nodded, quietly wrapped my hand with gauze while the rosary stayed inside my fist. And I remember feeling so grateful, so relieved, like I'd just been allowed to keep the last piece of the world I'd almost lost. And honestly, in those first few days after I woke up, I didn't even know how to talk about what happened. I was scared people would think I was crazy. I mean, who comes back from the dead with a rosary burned into their hand, claiming they saw Jesus in the fire? But I couldn't deny what I knew. I couldn't deny what I felt. At night, when the hospital was quiet, I would close my eyes, hold the rosary tight, and whisper the Hail Mary. Not because someone told me to, not because I was afraid, but because I finally understood what it meant to need mercy. And every time I prayed, it was like a piece of that fire in me turned into light. Like every word was a thread stitching my soul back together. And for the first time in my life, I started to hope that maybe, just maybe, I could become the kind of person who prays with love instead of mocking with fear. The weeks after I woke up were the hardest. Physically, my body was healing, but inside, I was battling something way bigger. This flood of emotions, memories, and questions that wouldn't let me rest. Friends and family wanted to hear my story, but every time I tried to explain, words failed me. How do you tell someone that you died, stood in fire, saw Jesus, and held a rosary you used to mock? They looked at me like I was crazy. And honestly, some days I doubted myself too. But the rosary never left my side. It was more than beads and prayers now. It was my anchor to that other world, to the mercy I glimpsed, and to the promise that I wasn't finished. I started carrying it everywhere, and slowly I began to learn the prayers, not out of obligation, but out of this deep, aching need to connect with something real, something bigger than my past mistakes. One night, alone in my room, I finally prayed the rosary for the first time. It was awkward, my voice trembling, the words unfamiliar. But with every Hail Mary, I felt something softening inside me, like a door opening that I had slammed shut for years. Tears streamed down my face, and I whispered, "Please help me be better. Help me live for something that matters." It wasn't magic, and it wasn't instant. Healing never is. But that night, I felt like I took the first step out of the fire and into hope. And you know what surprised me the most? How people started to notice the change. The anger I used to carry faded. My sarcasm softened. I found myself listening more than mocking. My mom cried when I told her I wanted to go back to church. With her, not against her. She said it was a miracle, and honestly, I think it was. Even my old friends were shocked. The girl who once made jokes about faith was now telling them about mercy, about second chances, about how the rosary saved her life, literally. Some laughed it off, some asked questions, and a few actually started to pray with me. I don't know where this path leads yet, but I do know this. That night in the fire, holding the rosary, I met the truth. And it was the hardest, most beautiful thing I've ever faced. So yeah, I mocked the rosary. I laughed at it. But when I died, when I really died, it was the only thing that saved me. And now, it's the only thing I hold on to. All right, this is the final part. The part I never thought I'd be able to share, but here it is. After everything, after waking up and carrying the rosary like it was my lifeline, something shifted in me so deeply it changed the way I live every single day. You know, people ask me, Emily, how do you go on after something like that? How do you live with what you saw, what you felt? Honestly, some days it's still a battle. The fear of losing that peace, the temptation to go back to old habits, the doubts creeping in. But every time those feelings come, I reach for the rosary. It's no longer just beads in my hand. It's a reminder, a promise. I think the hardest thing I've learned is that faith isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, about holding on even when you don't feel strong. It's about embracing the fire, not the burning that destroys, but the refining fire that cleanses and heals. And yeah, I was scared to admit that I needed that fire. I was scared to admit that the rosary, the very thing I mocked, saved me. But here's the truth. Sometimes the things we laugh at are the things we need most. The very prayers we mock are the ones that whisper mercy into the darkest corners of our souls. The rosary, with its beads and prayers, is more than tradition. It's a lifeline thrown to those drowning in doubt and pain. And I was drowning. So, if you're out there listening, feeling lost or angry or skeptical like I was, maybe give it a chance. Maybe pick up those beads and pray, even if it feels awkward or strange. Because you never know what might happen. Maybe, just maybe, you'll find yourself holding on tight to something that will carry you through your own fire. I'm Emily, and this is my story. From mocking the rosary to dying and coming back holding one in fire. It changed me, and I hope sharing it changes something in you too. Thanks for listening.